What's going on out there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome back on into a post-game edition of Settling the Kingdom here. Chiefs ended up taking the loss at the end of the day, 14-19 in preseason week one to the Bears. There's a lot of different things to look at in this game, obviously. We have a lot of positives. The Chiefs offense still like the Chiefs offense of old, even with some of the new faces on the team, obviously. And the defense stood out quite a bit, too, in the beginning. Justin Reed had a big tackle to start off the game. Happy to see him do that. But we have a lot of positives because George Karlaftis came out and showed out today, I think. A lot of pressures. Did end up with getting a sack there in that game, too. So I was impressed by him. What do you think, Tanner?
No, I'm with you. I like the defensive line. I saw a lot of good things off that defensive line. Stallworth, right? Stallworth was in a lot
Taylor
of those
Stallworth.
plays. He was getting in the backfield as well. Frank Clark was out there actually looking good and getting rushes on the quarterback. So hurrying up. Chris Jones got a sack, right? That's huge.
Chris Jones got a sack. Willie Gay come in and make a tackle.
Willie Gay,
too,
he had
so.
a few tackles that were really nice to see.
The good news is the first string offense and defense both looked solid today. So no worries there at the moment. And I was just happy to see some of the younger guys come in and look the part really and play their role and do it the right way. Obviously, Sky Moore got involved a little bit. Looked like what we expect so far. Patrick Mahomes only missed one pass, 6 of 7 for 60 yards, 1 touchdown. So he looked normal, of course, as expected.
Both Watsons on both sides of the ball. Was it Kenny Watson, right?
Justin Watson.
Justin Watson.
Justin Watson, receiver. That's actually one of Mahomes' favorite guys so far in camp. So he's talked about him a couple times in some of the interviews.
He had a touchdown too, and he looked really good. And then as well as Jalen Watson on the defense side, he had a couple plays he kind of misread, but overall I felt his coverage was pretty well.
Now, how do you feel about the run game so far? Because what we saw today, we saw a little bit of Pacheco playing primarily with the first string offense. So with that said, that tells you what the coaching staff thinks of him. As a 7th-round pick, already worked in with the ones over a guy like Ronald Jones or a McKinnon, he's already getting the workload. So what do you think that means for the foreseeable future when this whole thing goes into week one?
Well, that's scary for Ronald Jones and McKinnon. I can tell you that much. Look, I feel like there's still a lot of things to figure out on the run game between Clyde, between Isaiah. Gore looked awful. That was a rough game. Rough game. You know what? It's preseason game number 1. Let's see what he does next week. But that was rough. But nobody could really get it going. I think Isaiah had that one catch where he broke a tackle, got a couple more yards in the red zone there. Right. But outside of that, I wasn't really impressed by anybody.
Right before the game, you and I thought maybe Derek Gore would get a lot of carries towards the end of the game, end up winning the game MVP type of a thing. And he dropped a couple of passes and fumbled. At that point, he was out. They did say he had was it some kind of a neck injury? Is that right, Tanner?
Correct. Yeah, it's a neck injury right now.
Okay, neck injury. So I didn't think Derek Gore was going to make this team anyways, and today solidified that. Now the other one on the list obviously is Ronald Jones. The offensive line wasn't helping him at all, though.
No, everything was blown up every time, too.
He didn't do great in pass protection, which is one of his problems in the first place. And at this point, man, it's going to be tough to make the roster. If you can't pass protect and you have bad hands in the passing game, Ronald Jones might end up being the odd man out of this whole situation anyways.
I would expect next week to see more Ronald Jones with the first team, to see exactly how he looks, what happens, because obviously there's a big difference between first, second, and third string, right? So as we saw towards the end of the game, a little rough. But I think Ronald Jones is going to get his opportunity to showcase what he can do and if he can be an effective runner still.
Yeah, one more positive to point out. My boy Leo Chenal out there got 7 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, blew up a screen pass, and is making plays all over the place. He's going to be one of the better run-stopping linebackers for this team for years to come. And I don't really care what kind of situation you're in. If you're at 3rd and 1 at the goal line, or maybe it's a situation where the team you're going against just needs to pick up a yard or so anywhere on the field, plug in Leo Chenal just in case that run's coming because he's going to be the guy to make the play.
Yeah, I would anticipate seeing Chenal maybe next week work in with a little bit with the 1s and the 2s instead of being the second half guy. But I could see him playing most of the game actually next week for the fact just to see how he plugs in with Bolton, plugs in with Willie Gay and stuff like that. So I could see that. I love seeing him though attack the ball, get in the hole. He's fast. Mm-hmm. He made a couple almost plays there too on the feet. So but that's nice to see.
Well, I want to see between him and Elijah Lee. Obviously, he's out there working with the ones right now. I want to see how they battle it out for the rest of training camp, and if Chenal can end up stealing some playing time before the season rolls around here. Because personally, I see this guy as just an animal. I think he's going to be active, and whether he starts off just playing special teams in the beginning of the season or not, I just think he's going to eventually, as the season rolls along, become more and more developed and become a big part of the defense, actually.
And another guy that actually I thought had a decent game. I wouldn't say great by any means, but Cook.
Oh, yeah.
He had that special teams tackle going into play, and then he also was able to get his hand on a couple of times, get inside the ball on the reception. So I feel like he's not quite come along yet. There's still a lot of work to do. Same with Chenal kind of the way, but I feel like Cook had some positives as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool seeing Justin Reed kick the extra point too.
Yeah.
So I mean, that guy seemed to have a lot of fun with that. We saw him kick a 65-yarder in practice, and to be able to do an extra point in an NFL game is probably something he's not going to forget about. And if anything happens to Butker, we know that we have some kind of an emergency replacement, right? I mean, I would
you don't have to worry about it now.
I would say we have the opportunity there,
Hey, I like the theory, though. I told you this when he kicked it. We'll just have Reed come out, kick the extra points, make sure we don't miss any. Butker can focus on his field goals.
Yeah, there we go. That sounds easy enough to me. So we'll see about that. Some of the bad things from the game, obviously. Most of the second half, there was a lot of negatives for sure. Because this third-string offensive line is a disaster. And I was kind of disappointed in seeing Kennard, right tackle, number 75, getting pushed around a little bit. Our fifth-round pick, he was all-team SEC and from Kentucky. And I kind of, going into the training camp, thought maybe he would actually steal the right tackle position right out the gate and be a starter, kind of like what Trey Smith was a year ago. And what we saw today was him getting bull rush, pushed back, a little slow on the feet. The footwork wasn't there. Maybe he's not quite as prepared as I thought he was going to be.
Nah, it sounds like there's a lot of development and need for that on that right tackle spot for him. And it didn't look pretty. A couple of times he almost got bull rushed into our own quarterback. So, disappointment for sure. I was really hoping to see him be a little bit more dominant against a third, fourth string of Chicago, and yeah, I'm disappointed because I really thought as well that he would sneak in and maybe take that starting right tackle spot.
Yeah, at least the good news is for the Chiefs at the moment for the first string, Andrew Wiley did get better last year. He was a guy that 2 years ago, you and I both had a big problem with. Whenever we re-signed him, gave him a new contract, I was pissed off. I was like, this guy sucks. What are we doing signing him back again? It turned out Andrew Wiley just needed some more development time, and last year actually played pretty decent. So him being a starting right tackle out the gate, I'm fine with that now.
Yeah, Wiley finding the comfortable spot, I feel like, maybe right tackle for him. We were bouncing him around all over the line as well during that first time, and he came out, and I think he continues to look good at right tackle.
Yeah, I think obviously our biggest failure of the day is probably going to be Crum at quarterback. That was pretty bad. I mean, I don't know what we could say about that. It was kind of funny, seeing him kind of sit back there and take some sacks, and it was ugly. I mean, it's a guy that's not at all a polished NFL quarterback prospect of any nature. Shane, I always pronounce his name. You might
know
Shane Buechele, like Bobby Boucher, right? But
Boucher.
Shane Buechele went out there with over 100 yards passing on the game. He's the one that I think threw that touchdown, as a matter of fact, to Justin Watson. So that's a guy that, maybe if Chad Henne is over the hill too much, maybe Buechele can be our number 2 eventually on this team. He's been with the team now for a couple of years.
Yeah, he's going to be the 3 for sure. Yeah. So on that part, I was in defense of Crum here. I was really disappointed in our depth of the O-line. I didn't see anybody that really stood out. Allegretti, even when he was in, did not stand out to me at all. Right. I feel like he was struggling as well, and he's supposed to be one of our swing guys on the offensive line. So I don't know. There's a lot of issues on that O-line in general, not just from a run game standpoint, but also protecting your quarterback.
Right, and we didn't see a whole lot of guys depth-wise stand out on defense either, because as the game progressed, I mean, the Bears weren't really doing much, but neither was the Chiefs' defense. Chenal was making plays, but the rest of the guys that we didn't really see much pass rush coming from the edge.
I mean, outside of Stallworth.
Yeah, Taylor Stallworth, who played with the first string for a few snaps. So, I mean, he got in there late in the fourth quarter, I think, and made a few stops. But really, no one else is standing out and stepping up at the corner position at the moment. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing down the stretch here is, if a guy like a Jalen Watson, who the Chiefs drafted in the 6th round, can step up and end up being a part of this defense or not, or is he just going to be a training or a practice squad guy?
Yeah, and a guy like Devon Keys, who actually had some highs last year, blew up, had 2 touchdowns thrown against him, and it did not look pretty for Devon Keys. That's a guy who's probably on his way out here after week 2.
Right, we saw last year him getting beat deep over the top in preseason. Happening once again this year. I think that project's probably just about
experiment's about done there. So yeah.
Now, what do you think about the kick return situation? We saw the Chiefs trying to mix in multiple different guys at different spots. I think the best return of the day probably was the one from Pacheco, where he took it from about 7 yards deep in the end zone, returned it out to the 27-yard line. But otherwise, what else stood out to you about the game?
Just a lot of question marks on special teams, honestly. I think, like we talked about in the pregame, was a lot of turnover in that special teams area is happening. So, there's still a lot of who's going to do what, who's going to be where. And I think once you kind of figure out who's going to be blocking for you, then you can figure out who your returner is. If it's going to be Pacheco, if it's going to be a guy like McDuffie, even. McDuffie, I wasn't too fond of even returning. I don't want him out there returning in the first place, but I'd say right now Isaiah would probably have the role for it. But I mean, there's still a lot of question marks for Coach Tube to really figure out of who's going to be a special teams guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's for him to figure out, of course, and we'll see how that thing plays out down the road. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot from a week one preseason game you can take away from it and like project onto the regular season, just because there's what you saw today was primarily backups in there, and the first string, both offense and defense, did their job, which is all you can really ask. Um, I guess for me, I at least have now marked in my WR5, which is Justin Watson. So if there is a WR6 on this team, I'm not sure that's going to be yet. Could be Darius Fountain. It sure as heck's not going to be Corey Coleman or Josh Gordon. I'm not interested in those anymore. I think Darius Fountain is probably your best bet because he can at least play special teams. We've seen that in the past as a gunner. So I think he'd be your guy. And then Watson could end up being actually a part of the offense at some point, mixed in there with the other receivers. So Tanner, any other thoughts you have about the game?
Just that I think there's a lot more question marks on the both sides of the line right now that to watch for. So O-line and D-line wise for depth. So a lot more question marks, but I mean, we're only week one preseason, guys. They just take what they initially have on the depth chart, play it out, and then we go from there. So week two should look a lot different.
It's sloppy football 101. That's a preseason for you. That's the way these things go. So if anyone's out there discouraged by the fact the Chiefs did take an L today, then don't be. It's
all right.
It's gonna be okay.
Just because the losing streak continues.
We know how Facebook gets sometimes, so you gotta calm you guys down every once in a while and settle your asses down from getting wild. So
that's right. Well, guys, we'll make sure you guys check us out next week for the pregame show. We go against the Washington Commanders at 3 p.m. So we'll be on beforehand, and then we'll be on after as well. So.
And we'll be seeing more of the first string next week, too.
Yes.
So, obviously,
a lot more of the first string.
Mahomes will be playing most likely into the second quarter next week. So, that is going to be good news. And we'll get to see more about if we can get that running game going a little better because there was no running game of existence today's game.
Very fair. Very fair to say. Hopefully, we see something come into play.
Right.
Because a Chiefs offense with a running game would be one of a kind. And especially what we need right now in this division.
Yep. All right. Well, anyways, that's our thoughts about this one. So I don't have any final thoughts. I'll see y'all on the next one.
See you guys later.